What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to episode 124 of the Lombard Trucking Show. Thank you all once again for being here. Appreciate you all for tuning in the last episode. I'm not going to lie, for the past 2 weeks, I have been hype on talking about inland waterways, and it's just how fired up it gets me. I was at the beach all weekend talking about that company out of Miami that owns the patent on these barges that can, navigate up the Mississippi. Like I said, that stuff, this is an inland waterway respecting show here. That stuff fires me up. But as always, you can listen to the Lombard Trucking Show every Tuesday on Reach Across America Radio on the iHeartRadio network at 9 p.m. Eastern time when you tune in. And as you know, we are training for Ironman events, and we are 48 days out from the 70.3 in Waco, Texas. We've also got a fun announcement, hopefully soon to come within the next week or two, about another triathlon event later this fall. And you can donate to Wreaths Across America at wreathsacrossamerica.org/Lombard. One wreath is $17. Highly recommend, if you can't donate, that's perfectly fine. I know it's a tough economy, but if you're trying to get your employer, anybody on board with an awesome cause with what we're trying to do and raise awareness of, you can go to that link and donate or reach out to me. Also, real quick, I drank it all weekend long at the beach because I love starting my day with a nice mocha iced latte. But as you know, if you are out there over the road for your energy needs, that comes at a less caloric cost. You know that if you're at Quick Trip or if you're grocery shopping at Walmart, when I was over the road, I used to grocery shop at Walmart every week. You can get super coffee at any of those locations. You can also order it on Amazon using the discount code Lombard20 at checkout to get 20% off. Once again, it is the war on calories out there. I just wrote a piece for a magazine, a trucker magazine that goes out once a month about, what you can do immediately to increase your lifespan and health span. And the number one thing you can do right now is reduce your caloric intake. So if you're somebody who is consuming Java Monster or those Starbucks drinks, you can immediately cut your calories by switching to something that tastes just as great without any added sugars, a little bit more protein, and walk away a winner while building some healthier habits. So again, shout out to the boys at Super Coffee. Go get you some. It's delicious. Get my morning ramped up every morning with that stuff. But without any further delay, let's get into today's episode. A gentleman who I have been a fan of for quite some time, connected on LinkedIn. He's got an awesome story with it, especially within the transportation industry. One with with some family legacy, especially in the produce markets with farming. And there's not a podcast out there that respects the Midwest more than this one. So I'm happy to have a gentleman and a family story coming out of the show once again for this. And also at the same time, it didn't just stop there. The gentleman who's coming on the show, they very much have skin in the game with making the industry a better place. Very kind of linking it to that quote I always drive from Adam Wingfield of leaving the industry better than you found it. And they did that. DeGroot Logistics did that by acquiring Dock11. And we're going to get into all that stuff. But without any further delay, I want to bring him right up onto the show, Mr. Adam DeGroot himself. What's going on, brother?
What's up, Michael? How are we doing this evening?
Good, man. Glad to have you here. And you're coming at us from the capital of logistics.
That's right.
Yeah. What do we call it? It's either the Mecca or the it's the logistics capital of the United States. Some may say the world.
I'd agree with that. A lot of people might debate that, but there is no debate. It's Chicago, Yeah, absolutely.
It is. I tend to agree. I know that people over at Freight Waves and some other people will say it runs through Chattanooga, but if we're talking infrastructure and traffic wise, we're talking the Great Lakes, we're talking all that. It's got to go to Chicago.
We got it all. Like you mentioned, you're an inland waterway lover. You got barges, you got rail, you got trucks, you got the brains. There's just That's what's kind of what's kind of I appreciate the intro you gave. That was very generous. I've always felt super fortunate, and it still blows my mind every day. I grew up on a farm, a little over an hour. In the Midwest, we like to tell distance by time. So it's like an hour 15 south of here. And it's crazy, you know, I felt like I've never really, you know, been in a bubble in my life. Some people, you know, live in cities and stay in cities, grew up in suburbs and stay there, or in the country and stay there. Like just being, you know, this proximity to this world-class city, but also being growing up in a very rural area. And the business, you know, that I've been in most of my life, it's kind of crazy how we're a stone's throw away, and it's, you know, you're in the country, you know, so it's kind of a neat aspect that I think has informed a lot of the path I took, and, you know, a lot of how I look at, you know, markets and politics and all that. So,
yeah, I tend to agree with you, because I grew up kind of somewhat in a similar way. You know, I'm from, you know, I grew up in a town, Wolcott, Connecticut, but I went to high school in Waterbury, which is Waterbury is very similar to a Rust Belt city that you might find, you know, throughout the Midwest, whether it be Michigan or Ohio, wherever. But I grew up going to New York City. I mean, it's, you know, basically 60 miles from New York City, going to Mets games, going to Yankees games. So like to still in my, you know, town where I got to run around in the woods, but then Christmas time going down to see the, you know, the Rockettes and the Christmas tree in Manhattan. So being able to do that, it's definitely has its benefits. But enough about
both worlds,
best of both worlds. But enough about me. Yeah, let's hear the DeGroot story, man. So you're living in Chicago now, but you grew up on a farm. Yeah, walk us up to today.
Yeah. How far back should I start? Should I start at the beginning?
Roll up.
So I grew up, as you mentioned, you know, grew up in St. Anne, Illinois. Family has operated, you know, my brothers and I represent like the fourth generation. That's a little debated, you know, who really got into farming at what point. But, you know, it was in the 1920s, like the first DeGroots, you know, acquired some land in that area. And it wasn't really until, you know, the 40s that some more of the family kind of moved out and started farming. So, you know, at the time it was kind of sustenance farming, you know, some animals. There was a flower side of the business, a lot of, you know, like 40 or 50 different crops that were grown. But you do whatever, you know, it was produced to, you know, kind of feed the family, like feed the families that are working it. And then you sell whatever excess you have. So as time went on, you know, we get into the 70s. Prior to that, it was all like gladiola growing in the region, a lot of flowers and stuff, and a lot of Dutch family farms. DeGroot's a Dutch name, but there's a cooperative of gladiola producers that had like 200 growers in it at one point. So as time went on, that market changed, demand kind of changed for that product. And when the 70s kind of rolled around, my father and uncle started expanding the vegetable side of the business. And at that time, it was U-pick operations. So they had a farm stand. They probably grew 50 different items, but it was mostly people that lived in the area in Chicago. They'd come down and like U-pick, for people that aren't familiar with it, like you go out in the field, you pick whatever you want to pick, and you basically get like a wholesale, like a cut rate for it. It's just cheaper than buying it, you know, when somebody else picks it. So that was back when people did a lot of their own canning. It was just a different consumer habits for sure. Like nowadays, people might do that for fun for about 10 minutes. You go in a strawberry patch with your kids and take some pictures. But like, you know, then 50 years ago, people did that just to like stockpile stuff for the season. So that business grew. My dad really got the vegetable side of the business growing. And we really, you know, at that point, Chicago's population was really starting to boom. And the business kind of turned into like a selling like a truck farm, basically, or truck market, they're called, into the Chicago market. So we consolidated the number of items that were produced, but really just focused on the vegetable side. So, you know, they did that. 70s, 80s, kind of scaled it. It's my father and uncle. 90s rolled around. They started growing potatoes. So that was 1992 was the first potato crop. Today, that's the largest, you know, by acreage item that we produce. And yeah, I mean, it was different. Part of it was it's less labor intensive. It's more, you know, there's more mechanical harvesting going on. The planting's mechanical. So that drove part of it. but it was a number of factors. So they grew chip potatoes for a while, kind of branched into some other varieties. And, around that time, so I was born in 1988. I started kind of working around the farm as a teenager, in that time, like late 90s, early 2000s. But what really I would say I would credit like a lot of the business trajectory I went on. When I was 10 years old, my father, there's a farmer's market that started in Kankakee. So I had an older brother and I have a younger brother. Older brother was about 13 at the time. Younger brother was 6. And, my dad, he set up a partnership for us. And he was like, I'm going to sell you vegetables and your mom's going to drive you to the farmer's market and you're going to sell them at the farmer's market. And this was like his idea, like early education into business for us. So that we did that for a few years, and I would be, I'd go sell stuff. That's really where I learned how to sell. I would say like just, I'm selling to all sorts, anybody going to the market in Kankakee to, just get their groceries for the week. And, it was early enough, I was 10 years old when I was forced basically to do this. So it was like, it just became like a second nature to me, and that kind of stuck with me. So when I got my driver's license when I was 16, I was like, I don't want to work in the packing shed. Like, I don't want to work in a farm. I want to do my own thing. I want to get the hell out of here. So I started selling at farmers markets around Chicago. So again, we had the benefit of being like an hour and a half, drive from Chicago. So I started doing market in Logan Square. There's Andersonville is a neighborhood. There's some suburbs, we did one in Bronzeville, Brookfield. But it was like 6 days a week at a market every day. And then Mondays were like the day off where I'd restock stuff. This is all cash, so I'd do the banking and get the inventory ready for the week. And like summers when I was in high school and college, like I was putting in like 90-hour weeks, it was crazy. So it kept me out of trouble, kept me out of like, it's hard to spend money when you're working like that. But that really, I did that for a couple of years in high school, a couple of years into college in the summers. And I started going to Loyola 2007. And again, like that's where a lot of that, like that passion for sales, just managing a P&L, when you're 16, like I didn't appreciate it at the time, but like that's a huge edge, just later in life. My kind of risk tolerance in business, like just understanding how to, do all that. Again, it was kind of, by the time I was in my 20s, just kind of second nature almost. So went to Loyola. I was studying for a minute, like right off the bat. I was double majoring in economics and theology. And I think I was the only person to attempt that. Probably by junior year, I was like, I had the opportunity to graduate a little early. So I'm like, well, we don't need this theology double major. Like I had no plans. That was purely like a intellectual pursuit. Like I wasn't planning on using that for any sort of resume or anything, but graduated in 2010 and, went back and took over the vegetable sales piece of the family business at that point. So it's 2010. My dad, like probably 10 years prior, had started on the side a produce brokerage business, and it was called 4D Farm Product Sales. So that was my father, mother, my uncle, who was his partner in DeGroot Special Farm, and my aunt. So that was four DeGroots, 4D Farm Product Sales. I always thought it was a terrible name. Like it sounds like they're selling shovels or something, like it doesn't sound like it's a produce. So we'll eventually get around to rebranding that. But so I would focus on the vegetable sales side of the business for the months we were in season. But then the other 9 months, 8 or 9 months, I was hustling, like buying and selling stuff, working with farms, kind of building new relationships with farms and new commodities around the country, and just kind of selling to customers that we had, with our farm, but also selling to new customers too. So a lot of the focus with both what we grew and the other side of the business was selling to processors. So, the produce market's its own niche, and people that are really familiar with it and spend every day in it, like understand that there's different niches, the grocery retail, how that works is very different than how processing markets work. And like the economics of how you grow for these different markets are complex and like very nuanced. So we excelled, really focused on the process side of the business, and I spent a lot of time, building that out. So we're selling to companies that make soup, that make potato salad, that make French fries, that any sort of fresh cut produce. And as that business grew, we went from our transportation needs. We went from shipping at one point, for a few months a year to needing spot service all over the country with short lead time a lot of times. So at that point, 2011, 2012, I was a one-man band doing this. I was booking all trucks, that if I sold a load of something, I'd go cover it, So I had some brokers, freight brokers that, I kind of leaned on at the time. And yeah, it was just kind of a grind, it was a hustle, and kind of built out the business that way. So 2013 rolls around and we're growing our volume. This was the first, for anybody listening that has any sort of more than 10-year, history or perspective in freight markets. This is the first kind of tight freight market that I had seen in my short career in the truckload business. I'm in year 3. Yeah, I'm thinking that, there's some act of Congress that reefer rates $2 a mile. You can bank on that, all the time. And that was very much the, I hadn't seen a full cycle at that point. So 2013 rolls around and reefer rates, they exceed $3 a mile for the first time in my short career. So I was just spending a lot more of my time on that because we were getting all our trucks covered on a spot basis, really. And I realized, if we're going to keep scaling this and if we're going to keep growing, we're going to have to figure out the transportation piece. Like, we're going to have to do something differently. And that's really where DeGroot Logistics was kind of born out of that, some of that experience. So good friend of mine, college roommate, Rob Rochelman, he's our COO today at DeGroot Logistics. Kind of sat down with him and I was kind of shared what the thoughts and plans were. And we kind of kicked it off that summer. First couple of years was just us figuring out what the hell we were doing. Neither of us had any sort of formal training as a 3PL. We didn't work at an asset or a brokerage business. So we kind of came at everything from first principles, and we still are to this day, but we were bootstrapped, entirely too. So, so we didn't have the luxury of just, let's try out, let's go spend a bunch on this or whatever. Like, it was very much, we built it from the ground up, and I think a lot of the principles we operate by today, like, that's where that came from. So, it was all about, first and foremost, carrier relationships. And, any sort of business we pursued, we built it around, where we knew we could cover it. When we were, the first couple of years, we were a few people, on our team pretending to be a much larger operation. But, yeah, that's how we got our start, and we just kind of stuck to the basics. We just nailed the service side. And that's something we, to this day, like, we're just super obsessed with. If our customer has a 3-foot hurdle for us, we've got a 4-foot hurdle for ourselves, and we found that, just running the business like that, if you're nailing the service side, if you're responsive, if you just, all the time we get curveballs, last minute, day of, like, need help on this or that, like, you just get it done, then the volume will come from that, like, the opportunities come from that. And you just got to focus on the process. You get obsessed with really fixating on, like, oh, these are our profit targets. This is what we have to do per load and whatever. You miss the big picture. And it's really, we need to be absolutely essential to the large shippers and carriers that are out there in the US. And that's kind of the foundation of a good brokerage business. So that all the last 11 years that we've been scaling logistics, it's been an exercise in that, like, first principles. But as we got into COVID, that was a few years ago now, obviously, but, around that time, once we got kind of settled out the craziness of that, we really appreciated more and more, like, how we were just really effective at this, the food and beverage truckload space, we've got a core competency there, but we're still a small team relative to a lot of our competitors out there. And we really wanted to, how do we punch above our weight class? Like, what can we do to really set ourselves apart in a very, competitive market that's, red ocean, so to speak. Like, there's not a lot of ways to innovate. So, we made the decision at that point. We're like, all right, let's do it through, just building in our family companies, kind of telling our story and staying committed to the service side, but also building and acquiring tech that can enhance that in novel ways too. So that's where Dock11, the move to acquire Dock11 last year really was born out of that. I have known one of the original founders of it for a long time. Really looked up to him in a lot of ways. He was just early on this whole concept of like driver reviews. He pioneered in a lot of different ways, and saw how that could fit into this larger piece. I mean, those just the micro kind of interactions with drivers and the exchange of real basic information, facility information or shipment information that gets taken for granted, and like the trip planning, this is something, I'm preaching to the choir talking to you about it, but like the things that goes into how a drivers plan trips to really stay efficient and, optimize for a lot of different things. Most brokers, the thought doesn't even cross their mind, we, so we really wanted to focus on that. If we can, improve that, facility data that's out there, get in front of drivers in a timely manner. There's all these little ways you can reduce turn times and dwell times by minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And like those add up, and then those compound those, so many of the problems and exceptions that everybody deals with every day in the truckload world, those problems cascade. So like, if you can solve one of those problems, you really solve 3 or 4, because, when a driver has to drop a load because of some sort of breakdown or something like that, like they're canceling others, people are scrambling to recover trucks. And so that's kind of how we looked at it. And we wanted to build, a business on the tech side that was driver first, driver forward, because not many folks are doing that, these days. And we've had this whole logistics tech boom and bust in the last few years, and there's probably, I would say, fewer people working on that, what a very driver forward solutions. So that kind of informed how we got into Dock11. That's kind of this circuitous kind of path into, where I started and how we got here. But yeah, I always looked at, we're doing very different things in these different businesses, but the common denominator in all of them is, both in produce and transportation markets, we're just trying to be an awesome partner, an essential partner. And, we're trying to play long-term games with long-term people too. So I think one of the advantages of us, being bootstrapped is that we could do that, and we would never sacrifice that for anything, really. I think being able to make business decisions with a 5-year time horizon or more than that is such an edge, in markets today too. So yeah,
No,
so that's my like 15-minute, life story there.
dude, that's good. No, you ran it by and truck stop. Very impressed with it. Dan up there, want to give some shout outs. Dave Verona, thanks for tuning in, man. He says he loves the story. Reed's asking why you're not in the barge business anymore, and we're gonna get to that later. We'll get to that later, because I wouldn't, we do love talking about barges, but kind of pulling that apart, like from the beginning, I'd say like two main things that stick out to me. Number one, a lot of times, and you hear this in conversation whenever you're just like chopping it up with friends, but and I've read it on LinkedIn, like people always say like, how sometimes it should be required for people to do a stint in like the restaurant industry or something like that, because it gears you up for, no matter where you go in the future, it preps you for kind of like dealing with customers, like dealing with the public, or any really like service related job. And I somewhat agree with that, because I think a lot of the reasons why I have the utmost confidence to do things like have this show, have conversations with people who are way beyond my pay grade, or just like even in the Marines, I had to in Afghanistan, I had to give my opinion, and I had to kind of run through some stuff that had to do with our AO and things that have been going on, AO, area of operations. And I had to speak that to a general, and this is me as an E4, I get to he didn't want to hear from like when it comes to the guys like generals in the military, they don't want to hear from the officers or the staff NCOs because they know that they're supposed to know, but they like generals always want to hear from like those, from the NCOs or from like the lower ranking people because they're the majority. And if those guys are high speed, then it means the leaders are doing well. Like the leaders are going to know the answers, but do the subordinates also know what the leaders know? And then that's what makes the leaders look good. And I credit that to, one of my first jobs working at Burger King, doing that job is, it seems simple. People sometimes look down on working in fast food, but for what it did to me in high school, did kind of the same thing you did in that farmer's market like that. And your story with working at the farmer's market, doing that for like summers and going out and hustling, working those hours, like that's not, it wasn't a forever job, but what that did was set up the foundation. And, friend of the show, Dom Tulo, who, who's in our wheelhouse on Freight X and LinkedIn, that's the reason why he's successful today. He always credits to the fact that he pumped gas. Like, we're like working at that gas station. And when you're somebody who's put in those jobs or your family puts you in those positions at a young age, it's going to set the foundation. You're not going to do that forever. Like that's not the idea. But if you, the thing is, if you don't do that, take away that from your childhood and growing up, and you just go to Loyola for economics, I just truthfully believe that none of this story happens. You don't have the gumption or anything to want to bootstrap, a logistics company, and, to be able to, and then even going a step further is going to that farmer's market, like going out and talking to strangers and having those and being customer facing is very challenging. And I think it's a rare skill that companies are always seeking, because there's a lot of people who say they could do it. And then when it hits the fan, like they're not leveling up to where they need to be. So even if you wanted to bootstrap this company, kind of like what you said with wanting to help the carriers and build these relationships, and go that step further has everything to do with that. Which also leads me to my next point, is something I really enjoyed you saying, because this is something I think a lot of people need to hear, not necessarily want to hear it. Because this is what's happening with a company I know, and I'll leave their name out of it, but they're a franchising company and they own a bunch of fitness locations, and they have this, and they put in this new CEO, and essentially this new CEO is all about the numbers, and he keeps shooting, and they're shooting at these numbers, and they're trying to reel this comeback from COVID as competition has flooded into the market with their competitors, and all they're focused on is the bottom line. It's bottom line, hitting these dollar amounts. We need to do these. We need to hit these sales. And what gets lost in between are the employees. So the people who work there, and the personal trainers who work there, their well-being, how they're treated, their experience is deteriorated. So the turnover has gone up. And then at the same time, when the turnover goes up, in especially something like the fitness industry, and it's comparable to the freight industry, when the turnover goes up, how the customers receive that product now is deteriorated, because you have people who aren't bought in. So you lose, like when you lose sight, when all you're aiming at is numbers, you lose sight of the brand and the mission. And the brand and the mission are that's what's going to get you the money. And you just said that, they got a 3-foot hurdle. We designed a 4-foot one. When you do that, when you say yes to the hard things, when you say yes to the things that aren't going to make you money right now, they're actually going to cost you time. That's what's going to get the money back into your doors. That's what's going to get and that's what's eventually, you said that solving one problem for a carrier can lead to solving 3 more. I'm a firm believer in those types of domino effects, that when you solve that problem for that one carrier, you solve one customer issue, you're going to have 3 customers coming down your lane, whether that be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. That's all those are all major factors.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I love what you said. That analogy of like generals want to talk to want to get straight from the source, on the ground, like intel, because it's there's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot of the analog in the transportation world is huge. One of the things with Dock11, part of the whole reason to like, hey, let's get facility profiles built out. Let's let shippers build them and like share them and just get them in front of everyone. And so drivers can just go to the source. They're not relying on, what their dispatcher said, who's relying on what their broker said, who might be relying on what another broker said, and the game of telephone that goes into, the instructions that a driver gets for a shipment, it can get so messed up. Even simple things like drivers being able to verify an appointment time. It's a non-0% of the time that, somebody's, whether a dispatcher or broker's like giving them an appointment time that might not be correct, or like giving hours of operations at a facility that they didn't check, or like they don't know, or maybe they do know they're wrong, or they don't know they're incorrect. And it's finding all those little, when we talk about the small wins that you can pick up and that cascade just like the exceptions do. Some of it's just dynamic scheduling. And it's like, all right, we were talking about this before. I got a Monday, 7 a.m. appointment. Can I get in Sunday to get unloaded? And finding those ways to kind of drive efficiencies. They all start, a network and in our economy, like just being efficient at a high level, it's just millions of those transactions happening, So we try to really, and the only way you uncover those are, the people that know the intel that, have that information that need to share it efficiently, or like it's drivers and it's dock workers, it's the frontline folks at facilities, and, they know where the problems are. They see it every day. They're the ones running into it. So that's what, that's what Dock11's really all about, is taking those experiences and that knowledge that's, fragmented across millions of market participants, like specifically those two, facility workers and drivers, and capturing that data and getting it in front of the right people, that can do the analytics, and so that's what we've really, when we took over Dock11, it was at the time, and it was, I think, ahead of its time in a lot of ways, but it was all about that driver reviews and like the whole concept of that, and how can we make drivers' days a little better. And I think the vision that we've kind of expanded, that we're in the process of, rolling out, is let's turn this into a program and an engagement that helps shippers and carriers, large and small, like realize this whole path towards being a shipper of choice, and like what does that mean, and what kind of data do we collect to do that, and how do we use that? So yeah, there's a lot of areas. I mean, in this pretty cutthroat industry that's, pretty competitive, especially when volumes are declining. I think, and our team still sees a tremendous array of areas where there's mutual wins for everybody, and by everybody, I mean all the big, carriers, large and small, brokers, shippers, there's ways, opportunities to collaborate that everybody benefits from. So, I know you talk a lot about like just the truckload business cycle and driver turnover and like what causes that, and why, and we agree in a lot of those areas. There's this kind of machine in place that's all about like they want cheaper drivers. What are all these the policy structures in this country, like how do we ensure a flood, steady stream of new drivers all the time, and that's kind of contributed to this world where like you have a lot of new drivers, like that information, like, in your first year of driving, every place you go to is new. Like you don't know anybody, where you're going. You don't know necessarily how to navigate. You don't know what to expect there. And then over time, like the efficiencies that just come from going to a place over and over are profound, and I think Reed also talks a lot about this. It's, knowing drivers, like using the same drivers over and over. That's like the most robust anti-fraud solution out there. It's not some software, it's just working with the same drivers and carriers repeatedly. So that's a lot of what, that we're in that kind of same ecosystem of like, in the produce world, in the local food world, like know your farmer is like commonplace. And that's a common marketing shtick for a lot of companies, but it's the same thing, same thing is true in the freight world, like know your trucker. and just looking for those repeat lanes. That's where brokers' productivity and profitability, in terms of carrier sales and procurement, if you're using, the same carriers over and over, and like, you don't have to explain everything every time, and like, that's how productivity happens, in a brokerage space too. And it's really from a shipper's perspective. A lot of them know, they know which carriers they're tendering out their freight to, but they have no idea, by and large, the largest ones included, they have no idea how many drivers, what are the same drivers that are hauling on these lanes over and over. And that's where the efficiencies and effectiveness just comes from. So we're trying to replicate in some ways, how can that experience of a driver go into a facility for the first time be as if they have been there dozens of times? What information can they consume beforehand to replicate that? So that's a lot of the work, the data set we're really building out. How do you crowdsource that among truck drivers? Like, and there's all sorts of different ways we're doing it, and some we're experimenting with new ways, doing that. But it's fun. It's a big, anybody that's been in the logistics space for a decade or more, like, you come to love part of the puzzle aspect of it, and and it's all relationships and it's all planning and strategy. But that's kind of the unique way we're approaching it. Part of the why we got into Dock11.
Yeah, few things I want to touch on. You mentioned like that know your farmer thing in produce, and yeah, when it comes to fraud, I remember when I had good friend of the show. She's on Twitter, Laura. She's the tiny bull hauler. She's a young lady out of upstate New York, hauls livestock. It seems like people who work within that industry, which is aligned with agriculture. It's not produce necessarily, but she had mentioned on the show, and what I have a friend who's a bull hauler up in Georgetown, Texas. Like, that's a market you can't just break into. Like, if I was to go out, buy a truck and a cattle, car tomorrow, and I just start ripping calls to farms in the area, like around Texas, or I go up to the Panhandle and I'm trying to haul their livestock, and they see my MC, they're going to say, who are you? They're like, this guy's been hauling my bulls for 50 years. Like, his family's been doing it. And that's it's almost like gate kept because of relationships. And that's kind of how the industry was like pre-1980 because of the regulations. And the same thing is kind of how it is in produce a little bit. It's hard to make a dent. I think it's not as hard. There's definitely a lot of guys who go out there and get their own reefer trailer because there's probably more produce that needs to move, and different types of produce and at different times. But at the same time, again, it's easier. It's just as easy to fail in produce. I think it's easier to fail in produce as an owner operator than it is maybe in dry van, because in dry van, something can get repowered. But if that one produce load is bad, I mean, you ruin one relationship that could plummet your business. Now, going into Dock411, because I want to kind of talk about the usability of it, and like how people can use it, because it makes me think, because when I was driving, and that year 1 to year 2, like difference in driving, it is crazy, because in my year 1, especially when I was with Pam Transport, I went to all these different DCs and I was pulling Walmarts, and I went to a whole bunch of different when I was doing the Walmart trailers in the Midwest and then in Texas, I went to all these other different customers. And as an owner operator, I went to those same exact places. Like, I went to some of those same places, a couple of the same places in Ohio, Indiana. Like, I was good, and like knowing them, knowing the check-in process, it's like, yeah, things get a little bit quicker. But also over time, I wanted to know about some of the places I was going to, the new places. And the first place I would go is Google. I would Google review. I would go to the warehouse on Google Maps, and I would look up the reviews, and on it, and 9 out of 10 times you were walking into an entire mess of like, do everything you can to avoid this place at all costs. I waited here for 24 hours, $350 lumper. Like, all it was full of horror stories. But I would go to some of these places, and I'd end up getting in and out, and I'd be there for 2 hours, and I'd be out. And so it wasn't that bad. So it's just like, I'd be nervous going in,
Sure.
So I'm wondering, so Doc 411, essentially you're replacing that, because like the Google reviews, you can't really comment on. There's nothing, the shipper most of the time doesn't try to back it up or correct it or do anything from there. Kind of what's the difference between what's Doc 411 have over why a driver should just check Google reviews?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few things. I think the essence of the review itself on Google, it's a 1 to 5 star. It's kind of how Uber's, like you just called an Uber somewhere and you rate the driver 1 to 5 stars. And, we've studied this. If you have just, 1 to 5 star, pick that number in the abstract, you're going to skew towards more negative responses. That's just human nature baked into that. But there's also there's so much more context for a driver. Like we want to be the space that's more transportation specific, obviously, for reviews. And, to do that, we've broken it out into, there's 10 components to every review. So now drivers, anybody can go on the app, you can sign up, it's passwordless, we've got kind of magic login. Drivers can go leave reviews, and sharing those, you can share those, with your coworkers on your team, your dispatcher. You can share those, send those to the customer themselves. If you're picking up a load for somebody and you want to use this to kind of log and journal and document your experience there, you can use it for yourself. There's different, the social aspect of it goes in different directions, but the review itself, these 10 components, we'll ask you a 1 to 5 rating for cleanliness, for lighting. What's the lounge like? What's the maneuverability? What's the parking situation? The professionalism of the staff. That's, what was your experience there? So a lot of times in Google reviews, you could have 5s across the board. This is like an incredible place, but Debbie in receiving was mean to me, and you leave a 1 star and it's all about Debbie, the post. So it lacks context in a way that if you aggregate those scores, it means nothing. You don't really learn much by it. So we kind of take that into account, and and you can leave notes on each one of those components too. So, and you don't have to comment on one if you don't want to. If the lighting, if you just have nothing to comment on it, then you don't have to comment on that. So the review itself and the composition of the review is is a big, I think, differentiator, the primary differentiator. And, we're introducing this concept too with some of the shipper customers that we're engaging, and we're helping them kind of manage their shipper choice programs, helping them introduce their own variables into this review, and they might have some specific things that, maybe don't make sense to feed into this facility score, but they want to learn something about certain facilities or their supply chain. So they can survey drivers in that way too. So we're working with a lot of folks in that regard. But once you start with a reliable score for that review, then you can build on it. And our kind of larger vision is to help bring that concept of a facility score to the fore. I think one of the areas that there's been a tremendous amount of, I would say innovation, but I'd say a lot of work. That's like a lot of resources put into part of our truckload market. Probably too many is like the pricing, the way pricing is done. There's a lot of it is just, it revolves around like benchmarking and automating and doing it faster. And the speed is come at the sacrifice of precision in a lot of ways too. So I think, there's only a couple primary pricing tools out there, and everything is just, it's distance based. It's point A to point B. What's the Chicago to Dallas market right now? And, that's just really not how anything works on the ground in the transportation market. You can take a facility with it. What it kind of buries is that facility's reputation and what the driver is going to experience there and how quick they're going to get in and out of there. And I think incumbents over time, carriers and brokers, that run lanes all the time, they learn these things, and then it gets built into the price of the market, kind of builds into how certain lanes are priced into certain facilities just from that tribal knowledge. And what we'd like to do is help create a new variable that's used by pricing departments, across the industry to, just make pricing more realistic and more accurate. And for those facilities that just have a reputation for very extensive delays, that are already built into incumbents' pricing models. We just want to make that more transparent for everybody. So what happens is if you're a carrier or broker, you're doing an RFP every 6 months, every 12 months, and there's one location and that's a nightmare to get in and out of, you might win some business there your first go around because you're pricing off a benchmark or an index, and you haven't taken that account. Every time anybody learns about it, they have to adjust the price, and then they lose the price war, So you just get a certain chunk of freight in the U.S. where the turnover on who's hauling it is 100%, every year. And that in itself is contributing to that problem of nobody getting to know that lane, and you can't build regulars when the business keeps turning hands. So, and then a lot of our problems, come from nobody having the balls to tell a shipper, like, hey, these problems exist here. You got to fix them. Everybody's fighting for business. Everyone's fighting for volume. The last thing you want to do is go stick your neck out and complain about something, and then you just come off as kind of an ungrateful vendor almost, and so we think that but being a third party doing that makes a lot more sense for a lot of different reasons. So, and it's objective, it's data oriented. We're pointing to scores and actual lived experiences of drivers, and it's not anecdotal. So that's really that's how we aim to set ourselves apart. And there's a lot that goes into it, but that's kind of the essence of it.
No, that's pretty cool. I mean, this has the, Dock11 essentially has the ability to kind of make some people more money in the long run, where once it catches on that certain shippers are, essentially shipper non grata, that they don't want to go to. Eventually the bids and everything that's going to get this freight, they're going to see less money. They're going to be like, no, we're not going to do it for that much. And that's brokers and carriers kind of coming to it, be like, there's too many problems here. So it almost in a way can have an effect on the volatility of the market and work in carriers and brokers' favor. Now, what I want to know about is kind of the marketing with Dock11 essentially. So as I'm assuming as DeGroot Logistics, you guys, whenever you when you're brokering out loads and when you're moving freight and moving produce, are you the relationships you have with your carriers, you're kind of like, because I know Coyote has something built into their app that has to do with parking, just parking specifically. And I know that they're trying to incorporate stuff about, at least the last time I used it, maybe it's changed, it's different. I don't want to say anything incorrect, but I know Coyote within their app was trying to do this with nearby parking and having stuff that has to do with the facility, within the app. Kind of, are you doing is Dock11 kind of a part of? I know that DeGroot, you guys aren't Coyote to that size or whatever, but are you guys incorporating it into the loads you're brokering out there, and you're kind of every carrier who's taking a load out of you're kind of saying hey, you should use this. Kind of how are you? How's Dock11 gonna? Because I mean, this is an awesome. I mean, like I said, I wish I had Dock11. There's one time, and I wasn't angry about it, but I went to a Menards DC. Shout out Menards, and respect to these guys because there's bad weather in Wisconsin. But I was told, it told me I could deliver between 8 a.m. and noon on a Saturday. I got there at 9 a.m. Because it was between 8 and noon. I got to the check-in, and the guy was just like, hey man, it's 80 degrees in October. And so we only brought in half the warehouse today. So we're only unloading Menards trucks. And I was like, you know what? I couldn't even be mad. I'm going to go, I obviously trained for this. I was like, I'm going to get in a 10, 13 mile run. I'll get some workouts in. There was a parking nearby. And, I said, hey, they got a good lifestyle up here. I can't complain. But if I had known that beforehand, then I would have probably either tried to get there Friday if I was able, or not even try to check in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that kind of stuff happens every day. We use it. It's part of our, again, we're just trying to serve up the drivers a little more information that, they can plan their trip better. One of the things you could do now on Dock11 is ask a question of a facility. And these questions can be hey, are these your hours, or when you open? Hey, I've got this delivery appointment. Is this the right time for it? You can ask anything like that. And so our team will work to answer it based on what we know, like the data that is out there. And then, we'll link up with the facility manager themselves. And like, if we can't answer it, we'll put it in front of them to answer too. So like, that's the work, is like doing that quickly enough for, almost instantaneous responses. But I think those kind of things, what do you wish you knew about a place, after that's one of the, just a kind of review question. It's like, if you had to do this over again, what do you wish you knew? So, that's one approach to it too. But, you talk about the livestock example earlier from your time in the Northeast. So I'm actually on the board of the NIFTA. It's the National Protein and Food Distributors Association. We haul a lot of protein, protein products. And, that's another one of these niches in the truckload world that they've got some very, unique, but broad load specific challenges and issues that pop up. So just like truck parking, I think like truck washouts are a common one, and that like every load that picks up needs to have a washout. And, it happens all the time that getting a washout prior to so most brokers or dispatchers will just sometimes tell drivers, like, you've got to show up with a washout, make sure you have a washout receipt. And what we try to tell them, and we use Dock11 to do this, but before Dock11, we did this on our own volition too. Let's find the most convenient one on their path for them and make sure it's open, and just get some incremental information in front of them that can avoid a problem for us in the future. Because if it happens all the time, somebody picking up a protein load, they're running behind. They're like, I'll just skip this and maybe I'll get worked in, and they'll just sweep it out or something. And when that rarely happens, like, they have to go back, get a washout. It's maybe the next morning they're picking up. Now they're going to be late. Now there might be a late charge. Now it just ruined their week, So it's like, there's so many instances like that. And a lot of it is, different types of cargo have different requirements and different problems. But the truck parking one is obviously across the board for any type of freight. We try to answer the question first: is there overnight parking on site? And if there's not, what's the closest nearby? And if you don't do the work, as a broker or dispatcher to try to answer that question, and you leave it to your driver, it's possible they park somewhere, 150 miles away instead of 20 miles away, and that the odds of, a late delivery just shoot up from that too. So again, it's kind of, it's turning what we've always done in our logistics team, of like, try to go just do a little more, get a little more information, do a little more to help the driver stay on course, and plan their trip a little more smartly, turning that into a system and platform of its own too. So yeah, it's a lot of little things. Lumpers are a common topic, accessorial pay policies, like things like that. There's a lot of things that dwell time gets increased, turn times, get messed up because drivers don't know what they're getting into, when they roll into a yard somewhere. So,
Well, I got to tell you, I'm very bullish on Dock 411, and we're gonna link up. We're gonna have a separate phone call on this and talk, because I'd love to get a good TikTok video out there, kind of explaining this, because I think this is something that would. I'm shocked it's not already like gone viral as it is. So just so we have it on the record, because I know we're running on time, but I'd love to break that. I'd love to have another one-on-one with you to break down how, especially how to use it. But so is this a Dock 411 is an app? Are they using a desktop site? Where can people download it?
Yeah, there's a web app, mobile app. You can go download it. Again, you can search facilities. You plug in the address, plug in the name of the facility and address. You can go to the profile. There's might be facilities that aren't in our system. You can leave a review or comment on one that doesn't exist, and it'll kind of trigger that review and introduction into the network, that process. But yeah, check out profiles. You can ask questions, share profiles. I mean, we're working towards broadening it. So we're going to do more to crowdsource that facility profile. And there'll be this kind of side by side. This is what the shipper says about the facility. This is what, the trade, this is what the crowd says about it. So yeah, a lot of things coming, a lot of innovation coming. Products, there's the shipper focus, that's really helping shippers become that shipper choice. but we're also going to be rolling out things here before the year's out that are carrier focused too, that are going to help provide better tools for carriers large and small to really engage their driver community and crowdsource, that information just so they all operate, with a little better information too. So yeah, we see, the things we're trying to tackle is the driver turnover problem. If you're in the transportation industry, I think you have to have some sort of philosophy, some view on that. I think it's stemmed from driver pay, and like, what are all the things that are just chipping away at driver pay? It's this kind of stuff. It's time wasted on all these little things, and again, like small, just like small exceptions compound and cascade into bigger problems. Like, small moves in the right direction can do the same thing too. So yeah, that's the battle we're fighting every day. And yeah, we're excited. We appreciate the enthusiasm for sure. We just want to get the word out and evangelize this as much as possible.
Yeah, great word to use. I definitely, I can tell you from the driver perspective, that is when a driver is sitting, like if a driver has been at a receiver for 3+ hours, they are doing two things. One, wanting to quit, like right through their mind. They're like, that is what's going through your mind. I mean, me, I did my bet. That's always the time I tell people, like, you got to play the ball where it lies, and you're not going to fight your wait time any longer. So what you should do is get out of the truck and just throw your headset on, call some people, jump on Twitter Spaces, get your steps in. Like that, I always use. But at the it's not realistic, and it doesn't. That's just making something good out of a bad situation is what you should do. Like, get your steps in, do some push-ups, swing a kettlebell. But that's normally what people are doing. They are either contemplating quitting, or they may quit from that point on, or they're looking for another job. Like they are on Facebook looking at other carriers, other places to go. That's exactly what they're doing. And for any carrier out there, and anybody from a carrier who's listening to this, that is what your driver is doing when they're sitting, when they're at a receiver. They're on the job hunt right there. And but this is something that can fix it. But dude, I want to thank you for coming on. We're gonna hang out. Yeah, I'm gonna bump you out of the studio real quick, hang out. But yeah, we're gonna get online because we're gonna evangelize this together, because I want to help you do that. But thanks again for coming on. But before you log off, though, where can the people find you? On any social medias? Just plug yourself real quick.
Yeah, Dock11 app, at Dock11 app on Twitter. Go to dock11.com. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, we implore everybody to go check it out. Start leaving reviews. You can share them, different ways to do that, and just help get the word out.
Awesome, man. Thanks again for coming on. We'll talk to you in a minute. I'm going to walk this bad boy out. Appreciate it, dude.
Take care. Yep, appreciate having me.
Hey, man, that'll do it for episode 124. Amazing story right there. Awesome stuff going on with Dock411. I've been really wanting to have this conversation for a long time. And to kind of, there's some people out there on Twitter. If you guys listen to Kevin Rutherford, I greatly revere him. He talks about this all the time. Dock411 and what Adam DeGroot and DeGroot Logistics is doing. This is an example of how the market can actually enact positive change. This is kind of the free market at work doing something that it's supposed to do without, another government regulation, because we know that when regulations sometimes seep in, they end up solving one problem, but causing a myriad of other problems that stick out. And this right here is the market, people who are participating in the market, the labor. But specifically, it's the labor of the market. These are the shippers themselves, the workers who work there, and then the drivers who are going to these places. It's them telling you, hey, this is my experience with it. Take with this information what you want, conduct business how you want with it. And that's what Dock411 is doing. So honestly, an amazing piece of software that I'm looking forward to pumping out some content for, especially on Instagram and TikTok, because the Trucker Talk algo definitely needs to get this in the rounds, because talk about a game changer for thousands upon thousands of drivers out there. But once again, want to thank you guys all for tuning in, especially you guys live out there. A big chunk of you guys on Twitter and LinkedIn, especially. Once again, if you want to donate, go to reachacrossamerica.org/Lombard. We're raising money all year long for it. But other than that, guys, many more conversations to come. We'll see you on the next one. Back to the bench.